Hi again, everyone. I'm Ollie Matthews. This is the Narcissistic Resistance, and this resistance video is sponsored by contribution from Treasure Travel. And here's her story. Hi, Ollie. As I told you in my very first letter to you, I have a lot of stories to share. Lots of baggage, and I've been carrying around for a long time that I need to get off my chest. My first letter about the Purple Martin house was of a lighter nature, whereas the following letter gets into the heavier stuff. I had to work up to the heavier stuff. Like your mother, my mother was also a drunkie. And that added an additional layer of pain to my childhood with narcissist parents. Awesome. Pool Party by Treasure Travel. My mom never had one or two drinks, but rather would drink until she passed out on the floor. Shit-faced is an accurate description of my mother when she was drunk. Her hair would be disheveled and her expression haggard, with a gaping mouth and glazed eyes. She reeked of booze and would stumble and stagger and grotesquely slur her words. She was a belligerent drunk, and that always included accusing me and my sister of judging her for drinking. You're looking at me funny, and I only had one beer. In reality, she drank more than just one beer. My mother only drank when my dad was away on a business trip, but he traveled a lot. Yeah, that was one of my mother's tricks as well. You know, I've only had like 2 or 3 drinks. Well, what she wasn't telling you was, well, what she didn't realize was, everybody could see the giant drink mixer she drinks directly from that is basically surgically attached to her hand for the last 30 years, you know. So she just mixes her vat of vodka and just a splash of whatever and just inhales those, you know. In reality, she drank way more than just one beer. My mother only drank when my dad was away on a business trip, but he traveled a lot. Her basic pattern was always the same. She would go to the liquor store and buy a case of beer and a bottle or 2 of Jack Daniels or Jim Beam, and she would drink heavily so that by the time he walked home, we had walked home from school around 4 p.m., she was utterly shit-faced and would continue to drink heavily until she literally fell down and passed out around 7 p.m. Yeah, my mother isn't a pass-out drunk, not till the very, very, very end of the night. So, like, my mother was kind of a nasty, always drunk, but functioning alcoholic. We would come in the door and hear her on the phone, and we would look at each other in horror because we knew we were in for a terrible evening. She always drank and dialed. My mother would be sitting at the kitchen counter on the corner stool with her back leaning against the wall, holding the phone in one hand and a coffee mug in the other, filled with straight Jack Daniels. Yeah, it's pretty, my mother had this, always on the phone, was called the blower in our house, you know. Your mother's on the blower again. But there she would be with her vat of vodka, okay, and her 200-foot, I think it was probably about 100-foot phone cord. I mean, this is in the day, pardon me, this is pre-cordless phones. These are corded phones that my mother would put these monstrous fucking phone cords on that you could stretch them through, and she would walk with these things and you get clothesline, drink in one hand, phone like this, sometimes a cigarette, sometimes popping a pill or 2, a Valium or 2. You know the story. You know the story. When my mother drank, she usually called her mother and or one of a couple of friends from high school or a neighbor. Therefore, her alcoholism really was not a family secret. My sister and I would retreat to our room. We would sneak out to get food and try to avoid her and her drunk and derogatory comments. Usually my mother would burst into our room after getting off the phone and would yell and babble at us, and make accusations about how we were looking at her funny and how we were bad kids. Same thing. She'd come off that phone with her mother like a goddamn banshee. I have many memories of her passing out and me desperately trying to wake her. I remember worrying that she was dead or might die if I could not wake her, and I would check to see if she was breathing. As a mother myself, I simply cannot imagine being that irresponsible with my kids. My sister and I took care of our little brother during these times. He is 8 years younger than me, but there was no one to take care of me and my sister when we were little kids. Between the ages of 4 to 7, seeing mom unresponsive on the floor was terrifying. However, as we got older and this became routine, we actually experienced great relief when she finally passed out, because it meant that she was out for the count until morning and would not jump in the pool, get behind the wheel, break drinking glasses or glass doors. Yes, once she purposely kicked out the sliding glass door in a crying drunken rage, yell at us accusingly in her slurred voice, stumble to a neighbor's house, or do other dangerous or embarrassing things. You know, something occurred to me about, because that shit's horrible. That shit's horrible. But what occurred to me, like, just about, like, my situation, what kind of triggers me about your story is my mother didn't necessarily need to be drunk to do any of that. She didn't. She could do it stone cold sober. She could act like, do any of those things. Makes you wonder, is the alcohol masking the real personality? Are they using the alcohol to excuse their narcissism? Food for thought. Alcohol, drugs become a convenient excuse. The cause of the behavior. I don't buy that a lot of times. I think it's the cover for the behavior. Alcohol is the cover, not the cause of narcissistic abuse. Just lets them be who they are and gives them an excuse how it's not really me. The next morning we had to pretend that nothing happened, and she never acknowledged or apologized for her drunk and disorderly behavior. I recall a couple of times that my sister, maybe age 8, bravely dared to tell my mother that she had passed out drinking, and my mother yelled at us and said, "How dare we act so ridiculous about her having a single beer?" We learned that it was easier to just keep quiet. Ironically, one of the generic criticisms my mom levels at us is accusing us of being overly sensitive. She always phrases it the same. "We did not raise you to be overly sensitive." Well, I think these examples demonstrate that she certainly did not raise us to be overly sensitive. I have several vivid memories of my shit-faced mother jumping into the pool fully clothed. I had to watch over her for fear she would drown, weighed down by her wet jeans and sweater. My sister and I would plead with her to get out of the pool. My first memory of her pulling this stunt when I was about 9. After my mother swam a few laps, she stumbled into the house with her soaking wet clothes, leaving puddles in her path, then took off all her clothes and passed out naked in bed. I remember taking off her waterlogged watch and trying to dry it and get it to work. I was worried that my dad would be really angry to see her watch ruined, and then they would fight, so I was focused on saving the damn watch. Seriously though, He knew what was going on, but made no effort to protect his kids. When he came back from a trip, my sister sometimes told him about the nearly empty case of beer hidden in the garage, and he would then confront my mother, and then they would fight. My mother would look at my sister with disdain, and many a time, while drunk, would tell me that I was her favorite, whereas my sister was crazy for making accusations against her when she only had one beer. There were numerous occasions where my mother stumbled to a neighbor's house drunk, with me and my sister following behind her nervously, trying to lead her back home. Again, like, my mother would get on her rages. She didn't necessarily have to be drunk, but I know that feeling of trying to steer the accident, steer the crash, without actually yanking the wheel, by yanking the wheel, like saying, please don't do this, because then that only makes it worse. Didn't it, drunkie? Didn't it? One night, she went to the Bartman's house carrying a jar of Orville Redenbacher popcorn, and she banged on their door. Mrs. Bartman opened the door and laughed nervously while my mother explained in her slurred voice that she knew that Mr. Bartman liked popcorn, so she decided to bring popcorn for Big Bad Bartman. Douche chills. I remember smiling nervously back at Mrs. Bartman, trying to pretend that this was not a big deal. I was probably 8 years old. I don't remember how my sister and I managed to lead her back home. I think the Bartmans were just too stunned to help us. I recall her going to the Bartmans on 2 other drunk occasions, and also her going to 3 of the other neighbors. My mother must have been thought of as the neighborhood drunk. I never witnessed anyone else's mom or dad drunk. Since my mom did not like having people over, it was very surprising to me and my sister that my mother said we could have a pool party when our dad was out of town. Setting you up. It had to be when Dad was out of town, as he could not stand kids, including his own. My sister was in 7th grade, I was in 5th. I guess we let our guard down because we were so excited to have this rare opportunity to have a party. To our horror, my mom got shit-faced. By the time the parents were picking up their kids, my mother was slurring and staggering. At least she was happy rather than a belligerent drunk on that particular occasion. Our friends were appalled, and my sister and I were humiliated. My sister's best friend was Serena, so it was particularly unfortunate that my mother stumbled when approaching Serena's mother and spilled her straight Jack Daniels down the front of this lady's blouse. Wow. Probably did it on purpose to ruin the friendship. Make you girls pariahs to your friends, ruin your goddamn adolescence. The alcohol's the cover, not the cause. My sister was paralyzed with embarrassment. Needless to say, that was the last time that Serena ever came over, as I'm sure her mother did not want her at our house, and probably my sister would never risk it again either. My mother always sabotaged our friendships one way or another. The last memory I have of the coming home from school to find mom shit-faced scenario was when I was a senior in high school. My mother was passed out in bed, her head in a blood-soaked pillow. I could not wake her. I found a gash in her scalp. She was in a towel, and there was blood in the tub, so I surmised that she banged her head on the bathtub faucet while in the tub, trying to rinse her hair. Her coffee mug had been knocked off the side of the tub and lay on the floor in a puddle of whiskey. Because I was so conditioned to hiding the alcoholism and being in denial, I did not even consider calling 911. She clearly needed stitches, and I remember thinking that she might have a concussion, yet I did not even consider getting her medical help. She woke up the next morning, and I told her how I had been concerned and could not wake her, and she admitted she banged her head on the faucet, but neither of us mentioned the alcohol. In hindsight, I should have had paramedics speed to the house with the siren to attend to her while inebriated and naked. That would have been a good way to try to end the denial. Yeah. Would have been a good way for her to have to end the cover for her shitty fucking behavior, because she planned all this. The alcohol didn't make her plan the pool party, knowing she knows she drinks when your father was away. She knows she drinks. She knows goddamn well what she does. So why plan it? Don't give me this because your father doesn't like bullshit. She did it to sabotage you. Sabotage your friendships, sabotage your adolescence. And then if she ever gets called on it, it's the alcohol's fault. The alcoholism's the cover, not the cause. So, thank you so much for your another contribution, Treasure Travel, and another story. I really appreciate it. I hope this helps. Thank you to everybody watching. Please leave any opinions or advice in the comment section below. And again, if you want your story read on the channel, you have a topic you'd like me to cover, a narcissist you'd like to expose, you'd like to set up Skype, a phone call, have a private video made, or a Facebook live chat, or you'd like to sponsor a video like this for someone who needs help and can't afford it, or just make a contribution to the channel in general to keep it succeeding, growing, and expanding, because this channel survives 100% on contributions from all of you. Without you, all of this goes away. So if you like what you see here and you want to see more videos like this, you know what to do with the PayPal and email links in the description box. Also, please like and share this video wherever you can. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't, and be sure to click the subscription bell to be notified of all my video uploads. I'm Ollie Matthews. This has been the Narcissistic Resistance. Take care.